Greetings. Welcome to our webinar, How to Measure Your Digital Transformation and Set Yourself Up for Success. Today, we will discuss some concrete strategies for benchmarking the progress of digital transformation projects and how to use this information to ensure a positive outcome. Before we get started, I want to go over a few items. You can download the slides and any additional resources for today's presentation in the resource window on your screen. If you have any questions, please submit them for today's experts in the Q&A window. If we don't get to your question, our presenters can reach out to you afterwards. Finally, if you're watching this on demand, you can still use all of these features, including sending questions to our presenters. Okay, let's get started with today's webinar. I'd like to thank PDSVISION for sponsoring this presentation. Today, we will hear from Rajesh Bullapragada and Wade Moravec, who are both digital transformation architects for PDSVISION. And let's get started maybe with defining digital transformation. Wade, can you tell us what that entails?
Yeah, I think that sounds like a great place to start. Essentially digital transformation is implementing digital technologies to change or create new business processes, to update your corporate culture and to update customer experiences. And the key thing is that that's driven by changing market demands and business requirements. And so those changes need to be tied to specific business goals and providing new value in the market or in your business. So it's not really just modernizing technology stacks. It's not taking existing technology and moving that to the cloud or upgrading systems. It's really changing those processes and changing the culture that goes along with those processes. And if we look at the idea of implementing these digital technologies to replace or modernize legacy processes, that really applies to a wide range of areas. So, if you think about modern online shopping compared to going to a brick and mortar store, or point of sale systems compared to, old, manual cash registers, or, if you look at modern agricultural equipment, all of these things, there's been digital transformation in all of these areas. And just at work, email, ERP systems, CRM systems, all of this is a part of digital transformation. What we're looking at, specifically today is digital transformation as it relates to product development processes. So, how are we taking those legacy product development processes of designing a product, manufacturing it, getting it to market? What is the digital transformation in that area? And a lot of that is digital thread, product lifecycle management, CAD, application lifecycle management is really the area of digital transformation we want to focus on today. And Rajesh, can you fill us in on some of the what are the specific market demands and how the market has changed recently that are driving companies toward digital transformation in this area?
Sure, Wade. Thank you. So as you rightly said, right, there's many forms of digital transformation. And when you're focusing on this ALM, CAD, PLM areas, I want to kind of draw the audience attention to maybe three big external pressures, right, that are fundamentally changing how we look at the elements that you brought out, right, processes and the culture itself. The first one I want to highlight is like just product complexity. If we look around us, a lot of the products are actually moving towards more electrification, right? So we have EVs in the automotive sector, even tractors, products that are used in our agricultural industry, they're getting transformed, right? This whole decarbonization effort that's going on. The second thing I want to draw attention is all the dynamic supply chain, right? There's stimulus programs across all different nations where they're trying to do nearshoring, and that's bringing back manufacturing in different places, right? Or the sanctions that we hear about because of which companies are looking to avoid probably certain regions or have alternate measures so that they don't have all their eggs in one basket, right? And the third group probably I'll highlight is the regulations that are being put forth, right? With a lot of that, let's say, connectivity that's happening with the products, there's increased risk probably of cybersecurity, like a cybersecurity or a security vulnerability, which is requiring us to kind of like take better measures as we introduce these products, right? Because if we fail to do so, it has like a large negative consequence of either not being able to ship our products in a particular region, and therefore resulting in, like, say, many millions of dollars or that is lost in revenue. So that's those are the things that I say are mandating companies to continue their investment right in this area.
Wow, thanks, Rajesh. That's a lot to think about when you're taking on a big project. Maybe we can think about it a different way. Wade, can you tell us what some of the characteristics are of a successful digital transformation project and what our listeners can sort of look towards?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think before we get into the characteristics of a successful digital transformation project, it's also important to look at what are maybe some of the characteristics of failed digital transformation projects. If you've done much research on this, or you've Googled digital transformation, you may have seen this statistic from McKinsey that almost 70% of digital transformation projects have failed. And that's pretty shocking. That's a very high number. And it sort of leads to two additional questions, which are, A, why do we keep trying if we're going to fail 70% of the time? And then why are we failing? And so to answer the first one, I think Raj sort of pointed it out in the previous answer, and that's that there's market demands that are sort of forcing. You don't really have a choice. You can't choose to do nothing or you get left behind if the market's demanding more complex products and dealing with more complex supply chains and things like that. And so you sort of have to move forward, even if you have to try 2 or 3 times before you're successful. But the nice thing about this is that this does give us a lot of information about why are these projects failing? We have all these projects that have failed. We can look at what's sort of common between them. And so if we look at some of the challenges that lead to failed projects, one of the key things, sort of going around the circle here clockwise, is the failure to establish like concrete goals. It's great to move forward with a digital transformation effort because you realize it's necessary. But if you're doing it just because Raj and Wade said you have to do it, you don't have a good foundational reason to spread to the rest of your team and keep everybody focused and keep them moving in the right direction. So, not establishing the true business goals for what we are hoping to accomplish, what timelines we're hoping to cut down, what costs we're trying to save, is just sort of putting yourself in a bad position from the start. The next, and one of the ones that we're going to focus on today, is the failure to validate your success against those goals. So, okay, you set up good goals. You said these are the reasons why we're trying to make this change, but then you're not doing that measurement and that validation to say, yes, we've actually achieved those goals. The third is poor execution. And again, that can often go back to not having clear goals. So maybe we don't have good leadership from the executive team. Maybe we don't have the people that are involved in the process really focused on why this is important, and they get distracted from it. Maybe we just haven't allocated sufficient resources in terms of people and time and budgets to making this successful. And so again, having those clear business goals, having that why are we doing this answered, can help you put the governance in place and make sure it's a priority to make sure we're not running into issues with the execution of the project. The next one is a little bit different, and this is where we might be successful with the initial transformation and the initial implementation of the new technology. We get those benefits, and then we fail to sustain that impact. We treat it as a single project that starts and is executed and ends, and we got a result, and then we forget about it. And if we don't keep up with it, maybe people fall back into bad habits. Maybe people go back to the old way of doing things. They start finding workarounds. Issues come up with the system and they're not addressed. And so that failure to sustain the impact is another big issue. And then finally, and a big one, and it goes back to that culture, is the resistance to change. these, even though we talk about digital transformation, it's really also a cultural transformation. You're moving from one way of doing things to a completely different way of doing things. And people don't like to do that. Even if the current process is, tedious and time consuming, if it's tedious and time consuming in a way that people are used to and comfortable with, that's comfortable. And ask them to change that even to something that's potentially more efficient can be a challenge. And so again, having a way to go back to those people and say, this is why we're doing this. These are our goals. This is what we're going to accomplish. Is really critical to make sure you're getting people over that resistance to change. And so that's again why those are some of the reasons why these projects fail. So now if we have that information, what do we see consistently across that other 31% of the projects that are successful? What are some of those common characteristics? To get back to Michael's question. And so some of those, we start out with executive sponsorship, having, top level management really bought in and letting the whole team know that this is important. This is critical to the business. And again, having those reasons why. This is critical to the business because we are trying to accomplish these goals that are important to everybody involved. And that can really help out with the governance of the project. And especially if we're looking at organizational change that involves multiple departments, you can end up with conflicts. You can end up with political issues between those different teams, and having that executive sponsorship helps to get everybody to buy in. It helps to cut through a lot of the bureaucracy to sort of resolve those internal political issues, and just sort of makes everybody know this is the direction we're heading and everybody needs to be committed to it. The next thing is just a phased approach, not trying to boil the ocean and do, revolutionize the entire organizational structure all at once, but breaking it down into bite-sized chunks that can be implemented, that can be adopted, and that can help you realize those benefits early on and start seeing the fruits of your labor. So being able to say, okay, we're doing this piece of it. We expect to get this benefit. You're going to make this change that it's a little bit easier to adjust to. And then once you do that, you can go back and look at, okay, here's the benefits we got from that. And now that starts to build some belief in the process so that you can move on and go to the next thing. And both of those sort of, we've talked about it a couple times, but those lead to the third point, which is a focus on employee adoption. The real key here, again, is that cultural element, overcoming that resistance to change, getting the people that are going to be affected by and using this new system or this new process on board with it. And so having, employees involved in that transformation process from the beginning, making them feel like they're a part of it, hopefully making them feel like they're leading it, can build that solid foundation for success. Making sure that we're giving them the tools and the training and everything they need to get on board, and trying to avoid, them fighting us each step of the way and trying to go back to the old way of doing things. So really making sure that you're focused on that from the beginning. And finally, having, as we're talking about today, having those measurable goals, clearly defined business goals that we're trying to achieve. We're not just doing this because we have to do it. We're doing this because it's going to give us these business benefits. Again, it's going to reduce the total number of late stage design changes that we have. It's going to reduce the time to implement those changes. It's going to reduce the amount of rework we have to have on the shop floor. Here are our goals. This is what we expect to do. And being able, that helps with the employee adoption as well, is to have that defined, have a clear measure of success so that we can go back and say, yeah, you had to change how you're doing things. You may not be totally comfortable with it yet, but here were our goals, and here's where we're at in trying to achieve those goals. Rajesh, do you have anything that you would sort of add there that you think I missed?
No, I think you nicely summarized all of it, right? I just wanted to remind the audience, as we said in the beginning, this is just not about modernizing, right? Or it's just not about digitalization of data or so forth. What we're talking about here is cross-functional, and therefore these elements are kind of really important, right? So having that executive sponsorship so that you can deal with any political bureaucracy or obstacles that may come in that area, right? And get to quick resolution. And doing this in a phased approach, because it's organization wide, will help allow enough time for the organization to kind of digest these changes, right, before you take on the next improvement step.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. And, it's pretty clear from what you're saying that these sorts of projects require consistent, intentional action from a company. Maybe, Rajesh, you can tell us why it's important to measure the progress and the results of these digital transformation projects?
Sure, definitely. So let me just advance to this next slide and build it up a little bit. I'll quote the famed management consultant here, right? I believe he said, Peter Drucker, who said, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it, right? So therefore, if we want to make a change, then we want to understand what has to be, like, what is the business impact and how are we going to measure it, right? Those would be the next obvious questions. So unless, like, as Wade has been kind of pointing out, it's kind of important to do so. And let me just build this up and also share a story of in my own professional experience, right? I worked for a company that wanted to actually introduce a new delivery model for their products, right? So they wanted to add like a software as a service product line. But this is a big change, right? You have to change how the product is built, delivered, and then how it is sold and then serviced by the customer, right? While the company took all those initiatives, there was no transparency in all the changes, right? And what that led to is there was a lot of confusion from the sales side on what they were selling. They were still selling in the traditional model, right, of snowflakes and one-offs, and that created problems actually from a delivery standpoint, where when you're deploying SaaS solutions, you want to make sure that they're not all each snowflake, right? There's some commonality with it, so that service department can help support them in a standardized fashion. Right, so when that transparency does not exist, then it creates all this negative bias, right? People are worried what it's doing for their role. They're more confused in their role and how to operate, right? And it adds to that the other pitfalls that Wade was mentioning earlier about resistance to change and so forth. So therefore, what we'll see here in the next few slides is what we can do, right, to set ourselves up for success.
Excellent. Thanks, Rajesh.
Yeah,
anything you want to add?
Yeah, just to dig in a little bit more on negativity bias, I think this is sort of fascinating. It's an interesting aspect of just human nature, and the entire internet is a fascinating case study on this. But it's very easy when something changes to accept all the good parts of that change without really thinking about it. It's just the way it is now. And it's fine, even though it's way better than it used to be. But if a piece of that is worse than it used to be, you can really get hung up on it. So you can have improvements in 85% of all the ways that change impacted you that are way better, and one thing that's a little bit worse, and that's the thing that you focus on. If you have Bluetooth in your car, you can get in your car now and hook your phone up to it, and you have a map on screen that tells you exactly where to go and access to all the music and the history of the world, and you don't have to pull out paper maps and change CDs and all these things that we used to do back in the day. But if you get in your car and the Bluetooth fails to connect and it takes you an extra 2 minutes to get out of the driveway fiddling around with things to try to get it connected, it's just the most frustrating thing in the world. And it's like such a little thing compared to all the benefits that we're getting from this, but it's easy to focus on that. And it's the same way with these types of projects that, if you're implementing product data, like CAD data management, to get all your 3D CAD data under control, you get huge benefits from it, but a user may go to check in something and it's an extra step to do the checkout and check in to make a change to something. When they try to check in something new, it may give them an error about this file name not being unique. And now they have to go jump through all these hoops to make sure that that gets checked in. And it's frustrating and it feels like it's slowing them down. And they're just not thinking about the fact that it's keeping them from causing a bigger problem down the road by having multiple files name the same thing that are going to cause problems. It's giving them version control where they know everybody has access to the same thing that's at the right version. It's allowing them to easily find where each of those items is used. And it's automatically generating, viewables of the drawing that manufacturing or purchasing can go pull up on their own and print out and access whenever they need. And in the past, they would come to the same engineer and bug them every time they needed a drawing. They'd have to open it up and they'd print it out, and it disrupted what they were doing. And so they sort of lose track of like, oh, I'm benefiting in all these ways because they have this inconvenience that sort of sticks out. And so again, having those concrete results where we can say, no, everything's happening a lot faster. Look at these metrics. Look how much faster we're getting things out the door. Look at how many less late stage design changes we're getting. Being able to go back and show that there is this benefit and remind people about all the good things just really helps with that sort of cultural adoption and sort of getting their focus off of what's the one thing that they feel like got a little bit worse.
Thanks, Wade. And you talked there about negativity bias, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about some of the other common mistakes that organizations can make when trying to measure these digital transformation projects.
Absolutely, because I think that's one of the key things as we talk about how important it is to measure things. That it's easy to just say, okay, we got to measure everything, and not think about like what's the right way to do it and what do we really need to focus on. And so, some of the common mistakes are, first of all, not having a baseline. So if we don't have an existing measurement of, how long each of these processes took before we made this change to the process, or we don't have information about, how many change notices did we typically go through on an average product, or how long did it take us to get new products introduced to the market before the change? Measuring it afterwards really doesn't allow us to see if we accomplished our goals. So we need to have that baseline as a comparison so we can see, okay, this is what it was like before, and this was what it's like after this change. The next couple sort of are opposite ends of the spectrum, but they sort of go together, and that's sort of looking at measures that are too big or too small. So, if our goal is we want to increase top line revenue, or we want to increase our market share, or we want to increase our stock price, those are all great business goals, but it's really hard to tie those. They're so big, it's hard to tie them directly back to the change that we've made in the digital transformation of this one area of the business. And so those may be a good starting point. This is what we want to accomplish, but we want to break it down smaller to say, here's the specific sort of sub measurements or metrics that we're going to try to improve to get there. The other side is going too small. And so this is where a lot of times if we're going in and working with a customer to look at, what's the return on investment going to be for this project, we may look pretty granular. We may say, how much time do people spend searching for data? Okay, you're looking for something. How long does it take you to go find that with your current tools, with your current system, versus how long do we think it'll take once you implement these new tools that have much improved searching and drill down capabilities? And so that may be part of what you're looking at is, okay, it's going to be a lot easier to find information. People will spend a lot less time on those types of activities, but trying to track that is just going to take a bunch of extra time and probably lose a lot of the benefit and make the process more cumbersome and frustrate people. And so you need to find that middle ground of, okay, what we're trying to specifically improve is, the amount of time that it takes to introduce a new product. So what is our total time for introducing a new product, the design time, all of those things. And so we know if we can reduce that, that's going to help us get products to market quicker. It's going to improve our top line revenue. It's going to give us those top level business benefits. And we also know that if we can reduce the amount of time people are spending on these more granular tasks, it's going to show up in that reduced project time. But it's something that we can realistically measure. So again, making sure that you're looking at the right values there in terms of something that is going to show a result in the fairly short term to allow you to come to some conclusions, but it's also not too granular. And that sort of leads into the next one. I think thinking about trying to capture these really, really small level metrics to show the results. One of the issues with that is you're not currently collecting data on that. And so one of the other mistakes we see organizations make is to try to introduce new metrics in order to track the success of this project. And so, if you're trying to introduce new metrics, again, if that's not something you were tracking before, you're probably adding new steps to the process in order to collect that data and in order to try to validate this. And so you're sort of artificially skewing the results and making your new process less efficient because you're collecting this data that you weren't before. And so ideally, you want to try to focus on what are the things that we're currently measuring. That's probably what's important to your business anyhow. Okay, we're tracking the total cost of a project. What does it cost to introduce a new product to the market? How much time does that take? Again, details about changes. What's our average time to complete a change notice? How many late stage design changes do we have? What information are we collecting on the manufacturing floor in terms of rework, scrap, all of those things? Look at those and then see how can we tie those to the projects so that we're not just introducing new metrics. Now, one of the benefits of digital transformation is that it may put you in a position to collect a lot more data and get some new metrics without having to add a lot of steps. But again, that's not necessarily going to be easy to judge your results on. That may be one of your goals is we want so many new metrics that we can use to make good business decisions. But it really doesn't help you judge against the before condition because you didn't have that information. But you can use those for future phases of the project. So, okay, we now have implemented this new tool that allows us to collect this data and see this information. Maybe some of that can be used for phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, now that we have that. And then the final thing is just having your metrics being misaligned to the solution that you're implementing. So again, if you're not tracking information that is really going to be impacted by the change that you made, it's not going to give you good results. If we're implementing changes that are trying to improve our product development process, we don't want to look at first time fix rates and mean time to resolve an issue and things like that are more service related. We're not impacting that. We want to be looking at product development results. And same thing if we're implementing new tools that are going to improve the delivery of instructions to the shop floor or to the service team, we don't want to be looking at the time to introduce new products because they're not related. So making sure you have those metrics aligned to what you're trying to achieve, and that goes back to sort of setting those goals from the beginning. Okay, here's what our challenges are. Here are the business drivers and the business values that we think we're going to improve by making those changes, and here's the solution that's going to accomplish that. It keeps it all consistent from the beginning and gives us a good path forward. Rajesh, any additional comments on any of those?
No, I think you went through that thoroughly. I'll just probably summarize saying that, the key thing is that balance, right, of knowing what are there's the risk of trying to measure too many things so that it creates noise. So how do we extract the signal from the noise, right? I think that's the key thing. And sometimes it may need some experimentation to get onto what really matters.
Excellent. Thanks, Rajesh and Wade. And, you know, we talked now about some of the mistakes and some of the maybe the wrong things that should be measured. Rajesh, what are some of the common business drivers that a company should measure, and how should they measure them?
Yeah, good question. So as I move on to this slide, here is a list of them, right? So again, a lot of this is probably known to department leaders, and they're already measuring items, right? If I just pulled out a few from each of the quadrants, product development cost is something that every leader, a VP within the different functions is going to be measuring, right? Like raw material cost or cost of goods sold. That's something that is tracked and also reported on, right? Wade had mentioned a few things about the late stage change. So we know, just to highlight on that one, like when you take new product development, right? In those cases, there's probably a need to measure how many prototypes have been created, which results in probably a longer new product introduction time. And as well as you're working with maybe the client itself, those late stage changes can result in more further delays, right? And let's say a loss in the ability to kind of like be first to market, or like understanding how to kind of deal with those late stage changes, right? Because you may be midway in that manufacturing process, and you have to decide whether you scrap what you kind of have built so far, or there is some opportunity for us to rework some of that, right? Which rework means there is more additional cost involved for the product itself. So here, this is a few lists. There's obviously a lot more that we could be measured, and it all starts with what is it that we are trying to improve within the company, right? So, and maybe I'll progress here to the next slide. In this case, what we're looking to do is tie this back to those business goals, right? So if it's I want to improve revenue, then maybe that's what is related to new product NPI time, right? So we need to understand, is it revenue oriented, or it's going to be savings oriented, right? Where we have to look at probably the raw material cost or the scrap costs and all that can be reduced. Wade, anything else you want to add here in terms of the drivers?
No, I think you covered it. I think, like you said, the key is, what are those very high level goals of increasing market share, or something like that. Maybe we think that in order to do that, reducing time to market will be one of the things that will help us to drive that increase in market share. And then in order to reduce the time to market, we can look at, okay, how do we reduce the total new product introduction time? How do we reduce the number of physical prototypes? Maybe those are a couple of the sort of more discrete drivers that are going to contribute to those higher level goals. We can pick those out as sort of, here are the key metrics we want to track, and we expect that that's then going to contribute to, our top end business goal.
For sure. And, you guys have talked a lot about what you shouldn't measure. We've talked about some of the things we should measure. How often should you be measuring these results? Is it something that you do once and then just continue ahead, or is it something that you do at the end, or do you have to do this throughout the project?
That's a great question, and it really does go back to one of the things that we touched on early in terms of the reasons that the projects fail, which is maybe you're initially successful and then you fail to sustain that, and that's why you shouldn't view this as sort of a single sort of finite project that you implement, you measure once, you confirm that you achieved your goal, and you stop and you move on to the next thing. You want to measure your results consistently over time. How frequently you measure that is going to vary. Again, for some of these more granular metrics that you may be tracking, you may be looking at those monthly. Other things you may be looking at quarterly. Some of those top end goals you may be looking at more every 6 months or a year, depending on, again, how long it takes to see changes show up. But the key is to measure regularly and do that comparison so you can start to identify trends. One of the initial areas where you're going to get benefit out of doing that is the fact that we all know there's going to be a learning curve on these types of things. Anytime you're asking people to change processes, then you're gonna see the benefits slowly increase over time as they get more comfortable with it. And so you want to track that. Okay, we may go live and look at these measures, and we actually have hurt our metrics that we're interested in. It's taking us a little bit longer to introduce a new product. But as people get more comfortable with the process, then we should see that start to change. We should see those metrics improve. So that's the first thing is, okay, where are we on that learning curve? Along with that, when do we start the next phase? If we're doing this in a phased approach, how do we know when it's time to sort of take that next step? And so again, monitoring these trends over time, we can start to see when those gains have leveled off. Okay, we're sort of climbing that learning curve. We're starting to get more and more benefit. If we're still seeing these things improve pretty consistently, we may be tempted to, oh, this worked out great. We've got all these benefits. Let's move to the next step. But if you've sort of looked at, what are the stages of competency as you climb that learning curve? There's sort of two stages that people refer to once you start to get competent at a new process. There's conscious competency, and then there's unconscious competency. And so when you're still in that conscious step, yeah, you're getting the benefits, you're doing the new thing, you're doing it the way it's supposed to be done, but you're still thinking about it a lot. It still sort of seems cumbersome, even though you sort of get it. You want to get to that unconscious competent state where it's sort of muscle memory. You just do it without thinking. It's the new way of being. Again, where you forget that you've gotten all these benefits, that's when you can really sort of introduce more new stuff without frustrating people. So again, tracking this over time just helps you see, okay, we've really sort of leveled off. We think we're confident that everybody's comfortable with that new process. Now let's take the next step, and we have sort of a new baseline. We don't have a changing baseline that we're going to be comparing the next phase to. So that's a big one, is just looking at that. The other one is, do you start to see some of that gain drop off? Okay, we got all these benefits, and then over time we start seeing things start to take a little bit longer. We start to see more issues on the shop floor. We start to see more change notices created. Hopefully that shows up in the data, and we can address it. We can ask, why is this happening? Is it that again, we started to lose some of the adoption? Everybody sort of got to that new way of doing things. They did it a while when it was a big emphasis, and people were sort of on them about, you have to do it this way. And then as soon as people turned their back, maybe we slacked off. Maybe people went back to the old way of doing things. They found workarounds. And so we can address that, and we can catch it before we lose all of that progress. Or maybe it's something else. Maybe everybody's still doing things the right way, but something else has happened that caused those issues, and we can address that. So yeah, the idea of continuous improvement, the idea of making sure we got the gains we did, but also that we're continuing to maintain those gains. Yeah, it's really critical to continue tracking this as we go forward, and again, have that baseline to know when we do the next step of this transformation. Now this is what we're going back and comparing to. We don't want to compare it to before phase one, because we've already fixed that. Now we want to compare to between phase one and phase two, and make sure we've got good results there.
Fantastic. Thanks, Wade. And everybody, we've covered a lot of ground so far. And I would encourage anyone who has a question about what we've talked about so far to add that to the Q&A section, so our experts can address them while we're all on here. Now, lastly, we'll move on to Rajesh. Rajesh, can you tell us how a company like PDSVISION can help somebody in a digital transformation endeavor?
Sure, definitely, Michael. So before I talk about PDSVISION and what we offer, I'd like to just summarize this talk, right? What we're showing here is a success framework, and again reminding everybody that we want to start with that top level business goal, right? So if I'm going through the slide from the top to bottom, you want to identify what is it that we are targeting, right? Am I trying to reduce time to market and increase revenue? Is that my goal? Then if so, what are those processes that are connected to it? Then and when you look at the bottom of that pyramid, right, is to say where is my maturity to kind of like, if I had to put a goal to say I wanted to do 10% improvement or 20% improvement, understanding where we are today, right? What's the current state? Do I have proper standards? What's the maturity of my processes? Do I have the right governance and the people supports structure in order to kind of go and kind of act on it, right? And like we said, no company can just simply improve their net sales just by watching the sales number, right? You have to, as we said, we have to kind of identify what are those metrics that contribute or can help make that change. So it could be, in some cases, just the quality of our master data, right? As we talked about, just improving the quality of our master data. In this case, I'm kind of referring to that whole bill of information. Right. So once we have that bill of information, it's going to help you make decisions faster. It helps you cut down probably that cycle time in different process areas and so forth. Right. So these things could be measured overall to see how they're contributing or how are we kind of like progressing rather in that business outcome. Wade, anything you want to add on this slide?
No, I think, yeah, that goes back to what we talked about a couple slides ago of, yeah, you sort of have your top end business goal, and then you're drilling down into what are the specific sort of areas we're improving to try to achieve that goal.
Yeah. All right. So let me just go. And here is an example, right? So far, we've been talking about digital transformation. In this particular slide, I wanted to draw your attention to probably the set of products that the company that we represent, PDSVISION, which is PTC, that has a breadth of solutions across the whole PLM digital thread, right? And what you see on the right-hand side of the slide are the use cases that currently we're seeing a lot of companies kind of invest in, right? One of the areas, two areas I wanted to talk about is the simulation-driven design. So we earlier mentioned about new product introduction, right? So if we go back, electrification and things like that are creating the demand for new products. And then in order to create these new products, we want to also get faster to market, right? And in doing so, if we followed the traditional channel of having different siloed teams where like design engineering and let's say your simulation team exchanging data back and forth, then that's going to add time, right? And so forth. And what we've seen is with the advancement of both graphics technology and AI and machine learning and deep learning, some of those simulation tasks can be brought forward, right? And we can you can talk to us on how we've kind of helped some of our customers. This directly relates to like that 25 to 40% of reduction in design cycle time, right? And eventually will help, let's say, help the company get better, let's say, margins in this case by reducing the operating, the expenses that are required, right, in the team or the time itself it takes in that process. So these are real results that we have seen our customers share with us. So and we can work with you on how to put together these programs, right? Another area is just the sales performance. So companies today are either wanting to go from that traditional ETO to a more hybrid kind of like a model, business model, to bring both the customer up front, right? And they need to equip their sales team to be able to like take that code and be more aligned with what the engineering function needs, right? So there's some modularity that's being built, and one of the technologies that customers are introducing is more that CPQ, right, the configure price code kind of technology upfront, and that needs to be, instead of that being siloed and not being connected with the rest of the department, you'll never see that benefit, right? It only causes, like we said, more friction because we are producing codes through the CPQ that are not that have some inefficiencies or are not compatible. And therefore, there's a lot of back and forth now that's happening between sales and engineering, right? And how can we like be more efficient in that area? So these being some of those use cases where PDSVISION comes in is we are like the largest global reseller for PTC. PTC makes the market-leading, best-in-class products across many of those solutions that we talked about, right? ALM, CAD, PLM, and even SLM with their recent acquisition of ServiceMax. Right? We are headquartered in Sweden, and then we operate out of 13 different countries, right? And we've been helping a lot of our customers. We have over 4,000 customers who we have kind of like helped create these PLM roadmap and help them prioritize their processes and so forth. Wait, before I move on to the next slide, anything you want to add here?
No, and I think this shows, PDSVISION as a company is reflective of a lot of our customers in terms of we're, used to be regional, standalone, one country type of companies, and through mergers and acquisitions, we're now a global company in all these locations, and so we have to communicate with one another. We have to merge systems together. That's the same thing a lot of the customers we work with are dealing with as well. And those are some of those factors Raj talked about that are pushing digital transformations. Okay, how do we collaborate with these people all over the globe in these different time zones? How do we take these 2 or 3 or 4 different systems that we have data in, and how do we connect those or build them into a single system so we can all work collaboratively? And those are things, we're living that change, and we can help our customers with that as well.
So let me just progress some of these slides. So just double clicking into what we do, right? So this talk is about how to measure and how to set yourself up for success, right? And as probably this is now evident to you, when we talk about digital transformation, there's obviously different areas, right? And then there's a question, I believe, as well. This is a continuous or an endless process. And the answer, yes, right, it is. And probably there are like different phases of maturity, as Wade said, right? The phase 1 could have its own set of goals. Then we kind of work on that, and once we attain that, we're going to kind of like build on that success, right? The next phase of evolution. And so where we kind of help is we provide those value roadmap services, and not only end with just providing a roadmap, but have the consulting, let's say, support, right, to go and realize those roadmaps that we have put together. We also have our own pre-packaged solutions that help reduce or de-risk the project implementation and help cut down the time it takes, right? So one of the other things is if change takes too long, then there's fatigue and we lose that momentum, right? So trying to do this in that agile fashion and being able to kind of like deliver results quickly is going to be also important. And that's why we think the value-added apps that we've built helps us actually differentiate us. Anything, Wade, you want to add here?
Nope, I'm good on this one.
Okay, so yeah, this is probably our last slide. To summarize all of this, right? I think it's key that there are multiple areas. So starting with having those value identified, prioritizing the processes that impact, right? What are the strategic goals that the company has? What are the, let's say, processes that impact them, and prioritizing it so that we are not working on let's say, unrelated processes, right, in this journey. And then identifying the best solution that fits the need, right? So kind of doing that assessment of finding what solution sets meet that goal and creating that roadmap, right? So obviously we talked about trying to embark on all of this as a big bang. Sometimes it's not going to be possible, right? And there's going to be some data dependencies as well. So we have to reach some maturity, probably with like your engineering bill of material, before you actually take on probably the next phase, which is how do I create those manufacturing bills of material from there, right? So understanding those dependencies, those interfaces, and creating the right roadmap, right? So that we are not kind of like acting on probably bad data because of which we will not be able to realize those benefits or see those benefits, right? Because if it's garbage in, then it's going to be garbage out. And finally, with these roadmaps, we can help support create these ROMs so that you can create that business justification, understand what it would take to implement these changes, right? That way you can get the buy-in and that management support that we talked about. So this is our last slide.
And one thing I would add is we've sort of done this sort of in both directions, sort of with different starting points. So one way that this sometimes goes is, hey, we have a business goal to achieve these improvements in value. We want to we want to reduce our time to market. We have this goal to increase our top line revenue. How do we get there? What solutions are going to help us to achieve those goals? And so we can go in and we can dig into what's contributing to that top line number. Where are the areas for improvement? And we can sort of align a solution to the goal. But we also can take a solution. Sometimes maybe engineering comes to us and says, hey, we know we need to implement a PLM system that takes care of bill of material management and change management. We're doing all that in Excel spreadsheets and with paper-based forms, and we know it's not efficient. We want to do that. How do we sell it internally? And we can take that solution to sort of a known problem, and we can help align the business goals to it. Okay, here are where you're going to see improvements in your top line numbers if you implement this. So again, we can sort of go either direction. Taking the business goal and building a solution, or taking a proposed solution and helping build that justification that helps get it into the budget and helps get it implemented and helps realize those values.
Awesome, guys. Thank you. And we're closing in on the end of our presentation here, but I'm not going to let you escape just yet. We've got some questions coming in from the audience here, and I've got a couple that I thought were really interesting. One's tactical, for sure, and the other one's more philosophical. We'll start with the tactical one, and I'll let you guys decide who's going to tackle this. But Tim asks, is it better to narrow down to a certain group of goals or processes to focus on first, and then using the results of that to prove the value of digital transformation throughout?
Yeah, I can take that one. So I think that in general, yes, you want to have sort of a fairly narrow focus of specific metrics you're trying to improve, specific business goals. Because if you don't, you start to get spread too thin. You start to lose focus, and so you may risk not meeting any of those goals. And so, yeah, as much as possible, you do want to focus in on, here's our top priority. We're going to focus in on these areas. Like you said, we're going to focus on quality and manufacturing goals. Try to get that implemented. Try to make sure we're getting those benefits, and then move on to the next thing. Now, that's not always the way that you're going to do it. But if you're going to bite off more than that, if you're going to expand the scope, you really need to make sure that you have that executive sponsorship, that this is a priority, that you're going to get the resources you need. Because that's one of the challenges, is anytime you're working on one of these projects, it's pulling internal resources off of their day-to-day tasks to help with this initiative and to help with the planning and the testing and all of those things. So if you're going bigger, you need to be prepared to dedicate those additional resources to that and have that focus. And so you really need, the bigger you go, the more high-end buy-in you need. And I'll also say it's not always possible to break things up, especially if you're replacing legacy systems. So if you're replacing a legacy system that had a certain set of functionality, and that your day one minimum requirement is that you at least replace all of that functionality with the new system, it may have to be a bigger project. And again, you just have to make sure you treat it accordingly, and you have all that governance. But the more you can focus, sort of stay laser focused on those immediate goals, I think the more you set yourself up for success.
Yeah. And I'll just add to what Wade, I think that's a good point, right? What I would like to add is, you want to stay focused on the goal, but at the same time, you should also like that early visibility, right? You want to keep sure you're informing your partner. So even though the goal and what you're trying to tackle is in the engineering department, you want to make sure, what are the changes that are you're implementing, right? You're informing them early ahead to the other department or your partners, right? Manufacturing or your suppliers or so forth, so that they can start being preparing themselves for the change that's coming, right? They may not be involved in the change today, but they know that some change is going to come down the road, but they're not like surprised in the 11th hour.
Excellent. Good answers, guys. And here's the last one that we'll go to. And this is the philosophical question. Raj, maybe we'll start with you here, and then Wade, if you'd like to add something afterwards, go for it. Ram asks, can we assume that digital transformation is an endless process? Raj?
Yeah, good question. So I'll kind of answer it this way, right? For a company, I think to stay competitive, you'll always have to look at what we need to probably transform from changing market conditions and the customer base itself and where the demand is coming from, right? So therefore, I'll say transformation and that whole goal is somewhat driven from an external forces, right? And that's always changing. And when we start embarking on that journey, yes, there's going to be, like we talked about, phases, right? So each phase is probably going to be a project which, as a project's definition, will have a start and end, right? We're going to work on these incremental improvements, and each of those phases should definitely have a start and end, right? But as a company, if you look at it, we have to be ready for transforming, right? Because otherwise, if we become too complacent, then that's where we expose, or we're vulnerable now for disruptions, or somebody else, there's a threat of somebody else coming and taking over, right?
I disagree completely. No, I'm just kidding. I just thought we needed some excitement. No, I mean, that's a little bit of a fatalistic way to look at it, that it's just going on forever. But I think that's just business, right? It's not so much that digital transformation is really this totally unique thing. It's a way of improving business processes and meeting market demands, more efficiently. And so I think in any business, you're always trying to look at, how do we improve our processes? How do we make the business better? How do we provide more value to our customers? And I think digital transformation is a key part of that. And so in that sense, yeah, it's an endless process. It's continuous improvement. You're always looking for, how do we get better? And digital transformation is a part of that.
Excellent. Yeah. And the first thing I thought of when I saw that question was, it's the digital arm of continuous improvement. It's just something that you always have to do. Excellent, guys. Well, that's it. That's all the questions we have. That's all the questions we have for today. If we haven't answered your question, or you're watching this on demand and you have a question, please feel free to put it into the Q&A box. And Raj and Wade will get those questions, and we'll reach out to contact you and discuss them. This webinar will be shared with all the registrants, so you can view it at your convenience. I'd like to especially thank Raj and Wade at PDSVISION for sponsoring today's webinar, and thank everybody that showed up today for joining us. Hope to see you again at some more engineering.com webinars in the future, and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.